Okay, so I showed you with the fitment of the quarter panel in the earlier videos, I think it was part 4, that the gap that was between the wheelhouse and the quarter panel opening. What I did is I cut that piece loose. You can see there's my cut line. I lowered it down when I had the quarter panel still in place, and I tack welded some metal strips on the inside to hold that in its shape. And now what I'm doing is I transferred some of the some metal strips on the outside here. There you can see one of the inside ones, and those are just helping me hold it in place while I make filler strips. And that's what I've done. There's a section from there to there, a section from there back into here somewhere, and when I'm all done, it'll be solid, and it just gives me a better foundation whenever I drill my holes into the quarter panel, that I have a nice area to weld to. Some places or some shops would probably just pack it with seam sealer and ignore it. I can't do that. I want it done right, and I want it to be as solid as it can be. So once I get this finished, then I'll work on getting the quarter panel back on and finishing up the details on that. I finished the prep work on the wheelhouse. It's kind of hard to see, but I did put self-etch primer once I finished building the little spacers. So that's in place. I prepped the inside here, the contact points where the spot welds are going to be on the quarter panel, and as well on the quarter panel itself. I did drill the holes, pre-drill, bare the metal around the holes so that it makes contact and welds good. Next step is putting the quarter panel on, and I think that'll take care of the back of this car, at least to the point where I can get the tail piece on, or the tail panel. Well, I finally got the quarter panel in place. I started welding it in. I did weld up on the mating area for the wheelhouse and the wheel well, so most of those are in. Still have to do some finish on those. I also welded in, or tack welded the seam here where it meets the jamb, so that's in place. I'll show you the door fitment. It's not too bad. Gap is a little bit off, but I'll adjust for that, maybe like I did on the other side. And also need to adjust the door a little bit. It needs to rotate a little bit at the bottom. I also started tacking it up here at the sail panel, and again, that's not something you want to rush. Take your time on that. And now what I'm going to do is tackle this gap, or this length problem. Basically, I just took a piece of tape, laid a straight line, and then I laid a second piece of tape, and that piece of metal that you see between those two, or that black space, is going to disappear. Now what I did is I took the extension and just kind of roughly set it in place on a quarter panel, and I looked at the gap between the deck lid and the extension, how much it sticks out, and that's kind of how I come up with that length measurement. So at this point, I'll cut that out, move that piece forward, and tack it back in. Okay, that's where the cut was made. That's the material I took out of the middle, all the way around. And now I've butted them back together. Now, of course, I can't put it exactly in position because I've only got one hand, but I will set these two seams together. And the quarter panel itself is flexible at this point, but I can reach inside and bow it out and make it line up with that the back piece. So that's not a big deal. I did want to show that now you can see past the vice grips that my length for the deck lid to the tail panel is just about where it needs to be. So that took care of that problem. The only other thing I'll have to deal with is taking care of this gap, and I'll be able to push this over a little bit. That way, when I do put the final welds together for the tail piece, or the tail panel, hopefully this takes care of this problem with the quarter, and I can move on and get this thing done. I will have to do a little bit of finesse work down there at the bottom where the angle is right here, but that's pretty minor. I can make a minor adjustment here and get it to line up, maybe even cut it up here and flex this piece down and line it back up and put another filler strip in. I mean, I hate to have to do it, but I want it to look right, and unfortunately sometimes you have to cut some things and reshape them. So hopefully this takes care of it and I can drive on and get this quarter panel done and move on for the rest of the car. Okay, there it is. I put it in place, clamped it, did all my little fitment, and of course tacked it in place. You know, I gotta finish welding here in a minute. But the only other thing I had to do was pie cut this down here. I'll put a little filler in there to correct that, because I had to get this angle down here, make that correct. Once I'm done with this and welding it back together, the next step will be putting the tail panel in place and welding it in, and I think it's going to be pretty good. I'm liking it right now.